Welcome, friends, to this live stream for Empty Clouds. A very good day to you, those who are present for the live stream and also those who join afterwards. Today I'm going to discuss a sutta called Nibbedhika Sutta from the Numerical Discourses Anguttara Nikaya. And this is Anguttara 663. This is a profound teaching. So we're going to touch on it and do some investigation into this teaching today. So big welcome to Rebecca, Manal, Gregory. Thank you for coming along, and thanks, Gregory, for the prompt to offer this teaching today. Let's begin by paying homage to our teacher, the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sangham namassami. So yes, we're going to have a look at this penetrative teaching, penetrative discourse that is Nibbedhika Sutta. I'd like to break apart the meaning, first of all, in the spirit of this sutta, break apart and dissect and analyze the meaning of this word Nibbedhika. So the prefix ni, in this case, signifies going into something or going through something, sense of inward movement. Nibbed comes from the root bid, which is to split or to break, to pierce, to penetrate, to cleave. So to break apart, to probe into, nibbed. And Ika has a sense of action to it, or having the nature of this quality of probing and investigating. So Nibbedhika, actively breaking apart and piercing through, perhaps we could say, like the veils of delusion, friends, to pierce through, to come to the reality, to the way it really is. And this teaching is like a matrix of teachings that the Buddha gives here. A little bit like the sutta last week on the Great 40 that we looked at. It has a flavor of Abhidhamma to it, this way of breaking up reality into its constituents, into its component parts. So we have 6 qualities that the Buddha brings in here, or 6 aspects of our experience, of our predicament, and then 6 ways of looking at these 6 aspects of experience. So just to go through the order in which the Buddha teaches this sutta, he speaks of the 6 qualities first of all. So he brings in here, there is sense pleasure, karma, the first quality to investigate. The next is feelings, vedana. Then perception, sanya. Then the asava, the deep-rooted or root defilements in the mind, in the heart. Then karma, actions or deeds, that which is done here. And finally, suffering, dukkha. So these are the 6 qualities that the Buddha teaches about in this sutta. And he teaches about them in 6 different ways. So he goes through these 6 ways of investigating, pulling apart, looking into these 6 qualities. So he encourages us to investigate them in terms of what they actually are, what the causes of them are, what the diversity is within each of these qualities, what the results of them are when they are playing out, when they're unchecked, if you like, when they're manifesting. Then he speaks about the fifth is the cessation, that possibility of cessation for each of these six qualities. And finally, he speaks about the way to let go or to come out of, free up from these six qualities. That is the path. So there's the matrix. And so each of these six qualities, each of these six ways of looking at them, so 36 different teachings are here. Now you can read the Sutta, friends, and I really encourage you to do so. What I'm going to do today is to try and investigate this teaching, penetrate through to the meaning of this teaching by applying a certain lens. And that is that which really imbues this whole sutta, the Four Noble Truths, speaking about cause, speaking about the problem itself, the cause, the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation. So I'd like to apply the lens of the Four Noble Truths to this teaching and to look at it in this way, in the hope that this will be one way of elucidating this really profound Dhamma. So, first noble truth, the quality itself or the problem itself. The first noble truth we're told is that there is dukkha. In the classic teaching of the Four Noble Truths, there is dukkha. There is a problem here. There is a predicament. We're in it. We might not feel it. We might feel comfortable in a way, but we are in a situation that is dire, that is you could say, dangerous situation. It's a situation fraught with suffering, fraught with stress. And so, first noble truth, there is suffering. This is not a satisfactory place we find ourselves in. So here in the sutta, the Buddha speaks about these six ways in which we can examine reality, the dukkha. And also he speaks about the diversity in relation to each of these qualities. So I'm going to go back to the qualities, the six qualities now, and go through them one by one in terms of what they are and what the diversity of them is. So first of all, what are they? So first the Buddha speaks about sense pleasures, karma guna, sensual stimulation. So focusing on this aspect of dukkha, he says, sensual stimulation has the quality of being likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing. So this for us is what we are dealing with. There is a sense realm out there, and it is enticing. It is easy to get lost in the sense pleasures. Here the Buddha merely speaks about pleasures. He doesn't speak about the suffering. That is, in a way, speaks for itself. But there's also the suffering to be found in the delighting in sense pleasures, the rolling around and immersing in sense pleasures, of course, as we know. So here the Buddha says, in verse form, here in this sutta, he says, greedy intention, lustful, desireful intention is a person's sensual pleasure. The world's pretty things are not sensual pleasures. Greedy intention is a person's sensual pleasure. That is, the world's pleasant objects stay just as they are, but the attentive remove the desire for them. So this is a really profound teaching in and of itself, friends, isn't it? The Buddha's pointing to the fact that the objects out there are just what they are. Can we recognize them as just that? And notice what we do in relation to them, what we're making, what we're creating. We're creating the sense desire. It's coming from here. The objects are neutral. They're just there. They're not doing anything. So we can notice here the Buddha's pointing to the encouragement to let go of projecting, not to blame anything out there for our suffering, not to attach our desire to objects out there, but to recognize that it's coming from here, it's coming from within. It's due to our programming, it's due to our conditioning, it's due to what's happening here, and has nothing really to do with the objects out there. So to recognize this is to begin to work with the problem, isn't it? It's like we can't work with the problem until we own it, until we recognize our responsibility here. So this is a very wonderful teaching to begin this sutta. The investigation of sense desire and where it really comes from, where it's really located. The second quality, the Buddha speaks of feelings, and he says, okay, to investigate feelings. What are feelings? They are pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And then perceptions, mental associations, are memories that tinge our ways of seeing the world. That is sanya, that is perception. What are they? The Buddha says perception is to be considered in 6 ways. That is perceptions around the 6 senses. So perception we can break down into the seeing, the heard, the felt, the touched, the tasted, and the thought, mental perceptions. So this is how we experience perception. This is what perception is for us. And what are the defilements? The asava. These are the mental obscurations that are at the core of our predicament. So these are 3 different kinds. Buddha says here there is sensuality, kamasava. There's the desire to be reborn or to become or to continue, bhavasava. That forward pushing momentum. And then ignorance, avijjasava, the core defilement of not seeing things clearly, which impels us to continue this round of suffering until we can cleave and break apart and penetrate this asava of ignorance. And finally, no, there's 2 more. There's deeds is the 5th quality that the Buddha speaks about in this sutta, karma. So there's an investigation of karma here. First of all, what is it? And here the Buddha says, it is intention that I call deeds. That is chaitana, intentionality. For after making a choice, one acts by way of body, speech, or mind. So the clear teaching here from the Buddha that karma, action, is of significance because of the intentionality behind it. That is what creates karma for us. That is what has results for us. That is what leads us onwards in samsara. So this short explanation of what is karma, it is intentionality. Intention that moves forward into thoughts, words, or deeds. And then the last quality we're going to investigate here in this sutta is dukkha, suffering. Suffering itself. In terms of the First Noble Truth, what is dukkha? It is to be known. Dukkha, the Buddha says here, it's rebirth, jati, old age, jara, maranang, death. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. Not getting what we want. In short, the 5 khandhas that are attached to. This is what suffering is. So there we have it. And this concise description of suffering we see in many places in the suttas. And there's so much there to contemplate. The life cycle is suffering for us, having to come into birth, ouch, how painful, and then having to face, at some point, if we're lucky, old age, to face sickness and to face death at the end of the cycle. This is inherently unsatisfactory. Also, within the cycle, within this life, we so often, don't we, friends, experience that which we don't want. We don't get what we want, we get what we don't want. This aspect of dukkha. And to really encapsulate the entire predicament, there are these 5 khandhas, and our attachment to these 5, body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, our attachment to these leads us into dukkha, to suffering. So here we have the 6 qualities being described and discussed in this sutta, laid out for us. This is what they are. This is how they are. And then the Buddha speaks about the diversity of each of these. So, coming back to our 6, we're going to go through them one by one again. What is the diversity of sensual pleasure, sense desire? It is the 5 sense doors. That is, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. The Buddha here doesn't mention thinking, doesn't mention the mind aspect, the mind sense door, but we can consider it also. So there is the diversity of sensuality. In terms of feeling, he spoke already to say that feelings come in 3 different ways: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. Here he goes further and says there is a diversity of feelings. There are those pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral feelings that are worldly, mundane, wrapped around sense desire. And there are the pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral feelings that are spiritual, that are not of the flesh, nirammisa, that are transcendent. Those feelings we may have as spiritual practitioners, letting go of sense desire and developing the mind. In terms of perception, the diversity of perception the Buddha has already mentioned. He says again, it is in terms of these 6 senses that we have the diversity of perception. So we're perceiving all the time, and we're perceiving in these 6 different ways, through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and also inwardly thinking about things, cogitating around things. Then he speaks about the defilements, the asava, and also the deeds, the karma. These 2 have the same diversity. So the root defilements and the actions can lead to rebirth in 5 different realms. So this is their diversity. So when we're deluded, when our minds are clouded by the asava, by the defilements, and we act or speak or think as a result intentionally and create karma, then we're moving in 5 possible directions. This is the diversity of actions and the diversity of the defilements. We can either go towards a hell realm, a hellish state of mind, towards a hungry ghost realm, towards an animal realm, a human realm or a higher realm, Devaloka, some kind of heavenly mind state or destination. So these are the diversities in terms of deeds and in terms of defilements. And the diversity in terms of suffering. It's interesting here, the Buddha speaks of degrees of suffering. So we've already taken in the causes of suffering, or rather the manifestations of suffering in our lives. The old age, sickness, death, rebirth or birth, not getting what we want, and the 5 khandhas bound up with attachment. And he says here, suffering can manifest in 4 ways. The diversity of suffering is it can be severe, it can be mild, it can be slow to fade, or it can arise and pass very quickly. So it's almost like, I used to be a medic and you'd ask patients about their pain, what is it like? Is it severe or is it mild? Give us a number on a scale of 1 to 10 to get an idea of how severe the pain is. And how is it? Is it coming and going rapidly? Is it a slow roll? Is it constant? Is it changing? And in the very same way, the Buddha gives us this diversity in relation to suffering for us to investigate for ourselves, to discriminate. All of these teachings are pointing to discrimination, are inviting us to grow in wisdom through investigation of Dhamma, aren't they, friends? So here we have this beautiful exposition of the 6 qualities themselves and their diversity. Now, having covered the aspects of this sutta that relate to the first noble truth, what is it? What is the problem? We can turn to the second noble truth and consider how the Buddha describes here what is the cause of the problem and what is the result when we are inclining towards continuation, when we're not interested in letting go of suffering. What is the result of each of these qualities? So let's look at the source of each of these. The source of sense desire, sensuality, also the source of feelings, and the source of perceptions, and the source of actions. All of these have the same source. So sensuality, feelings, perceptions, and kamma, deeds, are all caused by, as a result of, they come about as a result of contact, phassa. Without contact, we can then consider, without contact, there would be no sense desire. There would be no feelings, perceptions, or deeds. That's very interesting to consider. Here we have the paticca samuppada coming in, cause and effect, the dependent origination. Without contact, feeling does not arise. This is in paticca samuppada. But also here the Buddha is saying, without contact, perceptions do not arise. Sense desire does not arise. And actions, intentional action, doesn't arise. So there's much there to consider. It is due to contact that all of this plays out. We come into birth, we come into being, we have these 6 senses, and we are receiving input. The Buddha's already told us it has nothing to do with what's out there, but what actually happens is we receive through seeing, smelling, tasting, etc., and there's a response. That response is due to the contact, and within that response there is desire, there is feeling, perception, and there is intentionality that can come up. I want more, I want less, get me away from, give me. So all of this cascade really of suffering that manifests for us is due to contact. We can't stop the contact. As long as we're alive, we're going to be experiencing contact. Everyone experiences contact, whether you're fully liberated or not. Everyone is impinged upon, bombarded by experience. But the sense pleasures and the intentionality are optional. The sense desire, the Buddha's told us, is something we can investigate as it arises, to see it for what it is. We then have choices around it. And so it is for intentionality. The feelings and the perceptions, they will manifest, but we can choose how we relate to them. So the cause of all these aspects, these qualities, is contact. The cause of the defilements, the cause of the asava, what is the cause of them? The becoming, the ignorance, the sensuality, root defilements in the heart. The cause of them is ignorance, avidya, not seeing. It's a choice, you could say, to an extent, because we're kind of willfully and intentionally not seeing. We can train ourselves to open and recognize this. We can approach ignorance, in our blindness and shine the light on it. We don't have to be deluded in this way. But until and unless we do this, there is the cause here for these asava, which is the root ignorance, the actively not seeing, the going along with, the programming, the conditioning, the very strong compulsion to continue in the same ruts that we've always been in. So the cause of the defilements is ignorance. This ignorance is to be known. And the cause of suffering, the Buddha tells us, again, it comes back to the codependent arising, the paticca samuppada. What is the cause of suffering? The cause of suffering is tanha, is desire. So you can see, friends, how all these teachings are sort of interweaving with one another. It's just so beautiful to tease out and open up and see all the interconnections here, and to approach through wisdom this conundrum that we're in, and to clarify it, to disentangle, to make sense of these teachings. So here the cause of suffering is desire. And we can connect that with the cause of desire being contact. And we can consider all of these causes together. Ignorance is the root cause, of our suffering, of our predicament, of our being here at all, of our defilements. And so there's such a depth and profundity here. When the Buddha lays out the causes, we can deeply investigate them, contemplate them, see contact, note contact, Can we catch it? Can we appreciate the moment of contact through the six senses and just let that be what it is? In the seeing, there's just the seeing, etc. In this way, we can begin to uncover the ignorance that's at the root of our defilements, the root of our wrong seeing, and hence wrong acting, speaking, and thinking. And we can appreciate the ignorance that is the source of our suffering, channeled and mediated by tanha, by desire. I'll stop on that topic at the moment because there's more in this incredible sutta. The Buddha speaks then about the results under the second noble truth, we can consider the results of these qualities, because if these qualities are playing out, how does it go for us? The Buddha tells us here, friends. What is the result, vipaka, of each of these qualities? So sense desire, first of all. The Buddha says, when one who desires sensual pleasures, who is ignorant, generates a corresponding incarnation, partaking of either good or bad. So sense desires, when followed, result in further becoming. And depending on how we relate to them, it will be pleasant or unpleasant, fortunate or unfortunate. Also, this movement towards rebirth, pleasant or unpleasant, is the result of also feelings when followed, and also one who is ignorant. That is the defilements. Ignorance, becoming, and sense desire are the asava, are the root defilements. So the root defilements, feelings, and sense desire all have this result of propelling us forward into rebirth, into more becoming, whether it's tinged with merit or demerit. That becoming will be pleasant or unpleasant, imbued with happiness or imbued with suffering. So these are the results of these three qualities when they're playing out for us. The quality of perception. What is the result of perception? When perceptions are followed, the result, the Buddha says here, is wohara. Wohara means communication. It's very interesting to consider this. The result of perceptions, the 6 different kinds relating to the 6 senses, when they're playing out, when our perceptions are unchecked, then they lead to communication. That is, I would say, interlinking, consolidation of perception, enhancing of our tendencies to perceive in this way or that way, and the connecting both inside ourselves and also around us in relation to perceptions. We can solidify our world in this way, can't we, friends? We can develop concepts and views around life and action and other, and our own course through life in this way, when perception is unchecked, when it's not seen clearly for what it is, which is a response that is tinged with ignorance to whatever we're experiencing. So perceptions unchecked lead to the result of communication, of further entrenchment, I would say, of further attempts to understand, control, manipulate samsara. And then the Buddha speaks about the karma. What is the result of karma, of intentional action through thought, word, or deed? How does it roll on? How does it play out for us? He says here, in this very life, it can give results. It can give results in rebirth into the next life, or it can give results at some later time. So this is the result of karma to consider. Karma can be immediate, instantaneous, like when we are given a shock, when we're injured, when we're in a situation where we immediately feel the pain or the pleasure of an experience. That's instantaneous vipaka. Or we can do, think, or say something wholesome or unwholesome intentionally that has a result in the next life, or even beyond that. So there's the delayed effect of karma. And we can consider this aspect of the result. The result of this quality of karma is then threefold. Straight away, at some point in the next birth, or you could say at some point later in our experience here, or much later, not to be experienced in this lifetime or the next. So that's very interesting, isn't it? This is the result of karma. And finally, what is the result of dukkha? As dukkha plays out for us, the Buddha says, when someone who's overcome and overwhelmed by suffering sorrows and wails and laments, beating their breast and falling into confusion, or else, overcome by that suffering, they begin an external search, wondering, who knows, one or two phrases to stop this suffering. The result of suffering is either confusion or a search, I say. So this is a fascinating teaching. We can experience for ourselves perhaps these two possible ways in which we relate to suffering, friends. And this is really speaking about extreme suffering or obvious or acute suffering, is it not? When we're really struggling, overwhelmed by suffering, what do? Do we allow ourselves to flow with that and feel the despair and distress and agitation of that suffering? Or is there an inclination in the mind to find a way out? And what the Buddha's really pointing to here, the question that comes up for one searching for a way out of suffering, as who knows one or two phrases to stop this suffering? It speaks to me of prayer, the person who prays to God or to Jesus or to somebody to help, to help them, to extricate them from the suffering, which speaks of a abdication of responsibility. That's not quite the way, but this can be a result of suffering that is keeping us rolling around in samsara. So these two ways in which suffering can manifest, result, both ways are a dead end in terms of trying to extricate ourselves truly from suffering, whether we're overwhelmed by it, immersed in it, unable to see beyond it, or whether we're seeking and searching for some help and support, for somebody to pluck us out of the maya, to extricate us, to pull us, lifting up the hand, seeking for someone to pull us out. These are the two results of suffering that are bound up in samsara. So all of these results, all of these causes and results are speaking of the predicament that we're in, aren't they? They're speaking of the ways in which we're trapped and how we're not getting out of that trap. Fortunately, as in all the teachings of the Buddha, we've had the first noble truth, there is the problem, there is a predicament, there are these 6 qualities to investigate in this way. We've had the second noble truth, there are causes for these 6 qualities, and there are results when they are blindly playing out. But we now come to the third noble truth and the fourth noble truth in this teaching. The third noble truth, the Buddha speaks about the cessation of each of these 6 qualities. And he says, the cessation, nirodha, the cause we've learned of sense desire, feelings, perceptions, and also karma, actions, is contact. The cessation of these comes about when the contact ceases. The cessation for the defilements, cause being ignorance, for the root defilements, the cessation of those root defilements comes about when ignorance ceases. And the cause for suffering, the cause of dukkha being tanha, being craving, the cessation of suffering comes about when desire, tanha, ceases. So this is the third noble truth in relation to these 6 qualities. There's a lot here also to consider. So the way out of suffering is to let go of desire. The way out of the root defilements is to see clearly, to let go of ignorance, to develop knowledge in just the way that we can develop knowledge through studying suttas such as this one. And the way out of feelings, perceptions, sense desire, and action, intentionality, is the end of contact. That's not entirely satisfactory as a way out of suffering, because we can't choose to end contact, but we can know that contact. We can develop vidya, the knowing, come out of ignorance to appreciate the process or processes that are going on around feelings, perceptions, sense desires, and action, intentionality. We can catch ourselves. When contact is made, we can observe what's actually happening and not flow into tanha, the cause of suffering, or avidya, the ignorance that creates further defilements for us, that creates unskillful relationship to reality for us. So in this way, we can investigate cessation, friends, understanding and appreciating that contact cannot be done away with while we're alive, but the causes of suffering and the defilements can be worked with while we're alive. This is the way. There is the possibility of coming to the end of these, of coming to the end of the defilements, of coming to the end of suffering. There is the possibility of clarity around feeling, perception, of understanding the inclination towards sense desire and letting go of that inclination, and understanding the intentionality that can arise for us in relation to our experience and letting go of that. So cessation, the third noble truth, is very penetratively examined here in this sutta for us in all these different ways. And finally, the fourth noble truth, the way out of, the way to enable cessation. In every case, for each of these 6 qualities, it is the same. So for sensuality, for feelings, perceptions, action or kamma, for suffering and for the defilements, there is this one way out of suffering, this one path of practice for cessation. And that is, of course, friends, the Noble Eightfold Path. And so the Buddha here describes each of the path factors very briefly, just names them. The way to enable cessation, to be able to let go of all of these 6 qualities, is through following the Eightfold Path. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right mindfulness, right focus, right effort. And so there we have it. This is one lens, one way of looking at this beautiful sutta, Nibbedhika Sutta, the penetrative teaching. And there are many other ways of looking at it, and I've not investigated it and described it in order in the way that it's presented by the Buddha in the sutta. So therefore, it's essential that you go to that sutta and have a look at it, friends, read it through and consider it. And I notice myself with profound teachings of this nature, there's always more. There's always more. There's always an aspect that will be of great relevance to this moment, to this predicament, to this day. And so I encourage you to let this sort of be a reference point for you, and a way in which we can truly investigate not just the Four Noble Truths, but also we can investigate the dependent, codependent arising, paticca samuppada, imbues this sutta also. And that's something we can look at it in the light of codependent arising also. I'll stop here and invite, we have some time for questions and comments. I'm aware that this is quite a complex teaching. I've used terms and that may not be familiar to everybody who's listening. And for that, I apologize if it's not made sense to you, but hopefully there'll be some understanding that will dawn when the sutta is investigated further. So hi again, friends. Hello also to Margaret, Maria, Madeline, Geeta, Michelle, Amarantha, Bhikkhu Dhammadasana, greetings, Venerable, and Louis and Mandy, Greg, Burmese friend, Richard, Saraswati, JD Smith. Thank you all for being here for the live stream, and I invite comments, reflections, other references, friends, or any questions. So Rebecca says, are feeling and perception bound together as one experience? Could you give an example? Do perceptions change due to practicing the Eightfold Path? Thank you so much, Rebecca. That's a great question. 2 questions. Feelings and perceptions are very closely intertwined, aren't they? We can really gather from this sutta, for example, how they have the same cause, they play out in similar ways, that they follow on very quickly. One could say perceptions will follow on very quickly from feelings. First, the feelings arise. There's a contact and there's a feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. In this sutta, we also can divide into spiritual and mundane. So these feelings will manifest, and then a perception will follow through. But very quickly, we will perceive. A baby, who has very little conditioning in this present lifetime is still learning to, the senses are still kind of coming into play and being experienced in a very fundamental way by a small child or an infant. Slowly, that being will begin to join the dots, if you like, to piece things together and start to perceive from the blobs and movements around them. They'll start to discern, first of all, the mother's face, the parents' presence, and then diverse objects will start to be named, and we acquire language, we start to name and label our experiences. And there's a lot of value in this, in the sense that we can chart our course. We can only develop wisdom through this ability to, first of all, have some discernment around what's being experienced through the sense doors. But also, these perceptions can be tinged with ignorance, because we can join the dots in ways that are not always correct, satisfactory, helpful, leading us towards freedom. The opposite, actually. Our perceptions can tend to trap us, delude us, and lead us astray. So there is this process, feeling and perception coming into play, very closely related, but they are separate. They are separate khanda. They're separate heaps of experience, but we can notice how they interrelate very closely. And your second part of your question, do perceptions change due to practicing the Eightfold Path? I would say yes, they do. We can start to recognize that perceptions are merely perceptions. You know, we don't have to believe in them. The Buddha said perceptions are like a mirage in the desert. So they are tinged, if not totally imbued with ignorance, with an unclear way of seeing. So just to know that, to take that on board, can we investigate our perceptions and be prepared to question them, not to believe in them? In this way, as we practice the Eightfold Path, we can become much more light and free around what's perceived, much more, you could say, skeptical of the programming and conditioning here. Hold it more lightly. Be prepared to let go of our perceptions. Be prepared to question them all. And in this way, we have a different relationship with them rather than just going along with them. And you could say, taking them for granted. This is the way it is. I see this is like this. How could it be any other way? Rather than going along with perceptual experiences, we can be aware of perception as it happens and let go of any investment whatsoever, any sense of this being true. The truth is always other than that. Thank you very much, Rebecca. And that's it. We don't. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, we do. We have another question stroke comment from Juan. Thank you, Juan, who says, what about desire for good outcomes via the Dharma? The desire to identify wholesome opportunities, the desire to share them. Is it okay for those to burn brightly? Must they be tempered to equanimity? Thank you, Juan. That's a really beautiful contemplation for us all, isn't it, friends? How to relate to good desires, you could say, wholesome desires, desires to enable good things to happen for ourselves and others. Is it okay for them to burn brightly? Must they be tempered to equanimity? You know, it's a process, I would say, Juan. And it's a process that goes in this way for most of us, if not all of us. That is, we begin practicing, follow the path of practice, and you'll have noticed this yourself. We start to notice unwholesome desires and inclinations as they arise and lead us astray, and we start to extricate ourselves from the blind immersion in such ways of being. So first of all, any unwholesome desires and wishes, harmful, leading to suffering for ourselves or others, will fall away as we see with insight. This is not wholesome, this is not good. I want to practice virtue, right speech, right action, right livelihood. Through practicing right speech, action, and livelihood, we let go of wrong speech, action, and livelihood. We come out of these unskillful ways of being. And then as we continue along the path, we become more wholesome in our intentions and indeed in our perceptions. We become more wholesomely inclined, but we can still be very invested in this process of manifesting, of being, of becoming, of continuation, of momentum. And as we continue to follow the path, we can start to recognize that this too is suffering. We don't have to identify with wholesomeness. We don't have to generate wholesomeness. Far more beneficial for us in the long run is to, develop equanimity, to develop insight, to develop wisdom, and to see these inclinations, these obsessions, these energies bound up with samsara, bound up with becoming, and to let them go. And honestly, Juan, when we're willing to keep letting go of all the drives, of all the desires, of all the inclinations, all the intentionality, if we're willing to let go of this, it naturally purifies itself. And what happens is that right speech, right action, and right livelihood are automatic. They're natural. We don't have to make them. We don't have to strive to be good in the end, but rather strive to let go of suffering. The good is a result of that striving. So I hope that makes sense. And it's not to, knock goodness and good intentions and good work that's being done in the world. Not at all. This is the way. But as we continue along the path, we want to renounce and let go of and free up from any kind of push whatsoever, because it's not needed. In order to truly free our hearts from suffering, we need to let go of everything. And in the letting go of all, then we can truly manifest as a bright light in this world. We don't need to make that happen. That's a natural result of the insight that leads us to the end of suffering, friend. So I hope that makes sense. And thank you very much for giving the opportunity to explore that brilliant question. And for all of us, also, that's a contemplation, an ongoing contemplation for most of us. Yeah. Richard has a question, and this will be the last one because of the time, friends. And also it's the last question. Ayya, how would you advise a lay practitioner to approach the teachings of this sutta to contemplate and cultivate these perceptions as part of daily discipline? Yeah, that's great to consider, Richard. How do we apply these teachings? I would like to have had more time to discuss this with you all, because it's a huge sutta, actually, Nibbedhika Sutta. It has enormous implications, ramifications. All of the Dhamma is there for us. And it's in this excellent matrix of 6 by 6, the 6 qualities and the 6 ways of looking at them. There's so much there that probably for each one of us, there may be some aspect that stands out, that has significance in any particular moment. I would say how to apply this to your everyday life, to consider what are these 6 qualities and how are they coming about here and now, and what is the result when I am on autopilot and follow these qualities to their conclusion. The Buddha's told us here the results of each of them. And then how can I apply the Eightfold Path in my everyday life to work towards cessation, towards letting go of the playing out of these qualities? And we can take a quality at a time, consider sense desire, how it manifests for you and how it can be let go of. Consider feelings and perceptions and paying attention to them. How is it feeling now? What's happening right now? Are there any perceptions at play here? Is there any action playing out through speech, through word or thought or deed? Can I be aware of that? And can I notice where it's taking me and be willing to investigate deeply the intentionality and to let it soften, let it dissolve? Can I investigate suffering? Can I appreciate where there's suffering here? Is there suffering here in this moment? We can have the radar switched on for suffering and let that be our daily practice, and to notice when there is a agitation, dissatisfaction in the heart, and then to dive into that and find out, what's happening. Why? What is the desire here? What is the tanha? that's creating this sense of dissatisfaction. And the asava, friends, we can investigate deeply. Is there a becoming energy playing out? Is sense desire playing out? Is there something I'm not aware of? Something I'm not seeing clearly? Am I following through without investigation, without applying wisdom to the situation right now? So in all these ways, but I think for each of us there will be significant aspects of this teaching that will stand out at different times, different aspects. And just to let this teaching, it's like an orchestra. It's like we have all the instruments, we have the entire ensemble here. There's so much in this sutta for us to tease out and to pay attention to different players, different sounds at different times, and let the Dharma unfold for us in this way. And all of it, friends, with the attention on the third and fourth noble truths, to follow the path of practice, fourth noble truth, to aim for cessation, work for cessation, open to cessation in every moment, third noble truth. Ayya. Thank you so much for your kind attention, for your good practice. All good wishes to each and every one of you. Let's conclude with 3 heartfelt sadhus for our teacher, the Buddha. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.